Okay,
well, Pranam and Jajananda, everyone. My name is Rihi. I am a member of the YJ education team. Thank you so much for taking the time out tonight and joining us. So we're going to have Shanti Uncle begin by reciting the Navkar mantra. So go ahead, Uncle, whenever you're ready.
everybody. We start Navkar mantra. Is one of the most important mantra. Is been given by every Tirthankar for humanity, not just Jain. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayuriyanam, Namo Vachayanam, Namo Loe Sauvasahunam. Eso Panchanamukaro Sauva Pavapanasano Mangalanancha Sauvesim Padhamam Avai Mangalam.
Thank you, Shanti Uncle.
Welcome.
So this year, to commemorate Tirth Sthapna Din, YJ is hosting a panel discussion on the future of Jainism. Shasan Sthapna Divas is the day Mahavir Bhagwan established the fourfold sangh according to the Shwetambar tradition. During this panel, we will discuss the development of the Jain community, Jainism's crucial role in the present, and how it will grow in the future, touching upon the role the youth will play in this. So I'm just going to start off with a brief introduction for our panelists, and then we'll jump right into questions. So our first panelist is Mayuri Bhandari. Sorry if I mispronounced that. So she holds an MA in yoga studies from Loyola Marymount University. Her focus as an instructor or practitioner lies in the application of yoga beyond the mat as a way of life. Throughout her art, Mayuri voices female empowerment, environmental activism, and brown identity. Her poetry film BINDI has been recognized in Athens, Berlin, and Seattle. Her work was featured at UN's Women event in LA. Mayuri is an actor, professional dancer / national figure skater, and poet and filmmaker. Her background lies in Hollywood and Bollywood in theater, film, television, and voiceover. She also narrates audiobooks featuring South Asian stories and has a Bollywood on Ice YouTube channel. So welcome, Mayuri. Thank you for being here tonight. Next, we have Shantilal Parekh, or Shanti Uncle. He is an internationally known yoga teacher, reflexologist, metaphysician, and healer. He served for many years as the vice chair of the International Mahavir Jain Mission Canada, having been appointed directly by the chair and founder, Acharya Sushil Kumar. Even though Shanti Uncle was educated in the sciences from the Indian Institute of Technology, he has been practicing and teaching yoga for over 55 years and has been reading palms and working on the hands and feet for over 50 years. He has published books and posters on yoga and reflexology. Shanti Uncle has lectured on and demonstrated yoga at international conferences in India, Canada, and the USA. Shanti Uncle also holds a Master of Arts degree from the State University of New York at Buffalo and a Master of Science degree from the Indian Institute of Technology in Mumbai, where he was a silver medalist. So welcome, Shanti Uncle. Thank you for being here tonight. With that, we're going to jump in to the pre-prepared questions. So I'm going to let our panelists decide who wants to answer which question first, whoever is kind of first come, first serve. So our first question for you is, how would you describe Jainism?
Jainism, somebody who follows Jaina. There are 24 Tirthankar, but there are many other non-Tirthankar like Kevalis we follow, and we want to be a conqueror. We follow our Panchamahavratas almost as good as we can, 99%, if not 100%. There are like a important aspect which could be very important for like turmoil in the whole world right now. So Jainism is necessary more now with Ahimsa, Satya, Asteyam, Brahmacharya, and Aparigraha than ever before.
Would you like me to add to that?
Yeah.
I think what Uncle said is, Shanti Uncle said is definitely on point. We also see that the first 5 Mahavratas that are in Jainism are also the first 5 Mahavratas that Patanjali incorporated in yoga. And also, I think a principle that's really special in Jainism is Anikantavada. And I think that we don't see that multiple points of view, acceptance of others really in something that can be applied so universally, depending on your time and space and where you're located. And I think that's the beauty of ahimsa to such detail and how we apply that in living our lives even today.
No, perfect. That both of you, the definition, definitely a very well-rounded definition. So speaking of defining Jainism, next question kind of speaks to how your definition and your relationship with Jainism has changed for you over the years. So I guess how has the role of Jainism transformed as you grew up since when you were a child, as a young adult, into what it means to you today?
Okay, can I just start? I came from a small village. We have no electricity, no school, there's no buses, no train, nothing. And education was only up to 4th grade. And so either my choice is to quit or start doing some business or something. Luckily, we have a 5th and 6th grade. And so I have to move out from my little village to Lasalgaon in the Jain boarding, because there's no other choices if I want to study. So there I finished my high school. And while I was there, I was lucky to meet lots of wonderful like sadhu, sadhvijis. And because we're a small community there, we get to spend more time with them, learn from them. And because being a Jain, and we learn to fast, we learn to like appreciate certain food we should eat, shouldn't eat. There was no garlic, there was no onion served in a boarding. And a boarding house is also important to do once a month, samayik or pratikraman. So those impression are good choices, good quality things are developed there. Then when I went to college, there was like more people I met in Pune. In Bombay, that's where basically things opened up more, because there was a yoga championship, Maharashtra State Gymnastic Association, and people came from all over the world, all over the different places. And I was at IIT that time. I said, I know yoga, maybe I can try, just see how responsive. And I got a bronze medal in the state of Maharashtra. And later on, I got a silver medal. So basically, those are the starting point to come to here to furthermore. Jainism is always in part of her life. My mother did samayik and pratikraman. My dad did once a year upwas, and that was hard for him. He used to get really sick. But all the seeds planted, I had done not at high, but 3 days fast, 2 days fast, 1 day fast. And it's very wonderful. It helps you a lot physically, spiritually, and mentally.
Uncle, you had also mentioned earlier that you grew up around a lot of Jains, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about how that influenced your practice of Jainism?
Yeah. Vasant Muniji was like my guru. I can look at him. He was really amazing. He is very kind, and he has interest in math. He has interest in logic and puzzles and things. So he used to hold me and say, check this out. He's like almost 100-year calendar. He come up with his own name, and we learned that. But the interesting one, Swamiji, Jivan Muniji came to our boarding, and he has a tremendous energy. So what one time he did, he taught me some mantras there, and he said, you may need those later on. But he asked somebody to bring something heavyweight. So there was nothing else. There's the old shock absorber of the car. They tied like a thread with it. And when your thumb is like this, it is the fold here. He held the thread in that fold, and then lifted the shock absorber up. I was really impressed. He said there's so much in the mind does, rather, I mean, there's no way you can lift for something like a little thread here and lift it up with the weight on. So I see, and then there are so many siddhis they talked about, like Riddhi Siddhas, Ashta Siddhi, no Vidhi, chakras, and other things. They all come up very interesting. But then I met Anand Rishiji Maharaj. He was Acharya, And he said,
Mhm.
you know a lot about yoga and you know a lot about health without medicine. So whenever you come here, all sadhus and sadhvis, they all get together. And no matter what, sometimes there are 40 sadhu sadhviji. We did yoga for them. And so like, we all Tirthankar does yoga, did yoga. They're all sitting in a Khadgasana or standing in a Khadgasana or sitting in a Padmasana. So all this wonderful, I used to pick up their brain basically. They knew so much about Agam. I didn't have any knowledge, but they will quote and read this, read that. When I came to Buffalo, Vasan Muniji gave me 8 or 10 books. These are your thing. You follow 7 Puvashan. You will not do those. No drinking, no drug, no lying, no stealing. And that was like really good, because when somebody tells you to do that, you have power to follow it. I was alone before, then Kusum joined later on. And then people were turning vegetarian. So she ended up teaching vegetarian cooking course for them. And
Very cool.
the meeting Guruji is very high. Sushil Kumarji was like a major influence, and Chitra Bhanji was a major influence. When I was writing book on Jain Yoga, Tirthankar, they explained me how the lanchan could mean. And then I used the lanchan in order to like separate a Tirthankar different posture, like Rishabhasana, Ajitasana, Sambhavasana, and so on. And after coming here, because Sushil Muniji, people came from Europe, from India, from United States. There were like hundreds and hundreds at the yoga camp. And then anybody we have questions we didn't understand about Jainism, we asked them. Sushil Muni is there, Sobha Muni is there, Amrita Muni is there, Modi Smita ji, Priti Smitaji's sister. That was a really amazing thing to see them back home in India. We are tiny here, and there are thousands and thousands of people. Here, there are 50 people, and we learn a lot from them.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for your story. Mayuri, if you have anything you'd like to
Yeah,
answer
can you
the
just
question.
repeat the question again, please? It has
Yeah.
evolved as I've grown older, or I need it again.
Yeah, sure. So has the definition of Jainism and your overall relationship to how Jainism plays a role in your life, how has that changed since you were a child to when you're a young adult to how it plays out in your life today?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was really inspired by the Amar Chitrakatha, what was it, Amar Chitrakatha and Diwakar Chitrakatha comic books. Like there were these comic books on Hindu stories and Jain stories and Jain Tirthankars, and I really loved reading those. And they were really, because it was like I love stories, and I think that shows also now. So learning something through story or example or an analogy is something that I really enjoy. So I really connected to those growing up, but I always had a lot of questions. I was very curious. I don't just accept because I'm told. And so my mom was like, I can't answer these for you. You're going to have to talk to a marasab or a teacher. We don't have access to that very easily over here. Or someone, especially the small, I was telling you guys earlier, but I come from Vegas is where I grew up mainly. So it's very, very like 20 families, there's not a lot of teachers in that, it's just parents trying to do the best with the Bachala books. So, I would ask Munis a lot of different questions, but I also get different answers and different perspectives. And that sometimes things felt a bit dogmatic too, especially when I was a teen. And I felt that people sometimes that were around me, it seemed like people were more following the fasting and like almost counting good and bad karma rather than actually like living it out with family and how you were doing things beyond the little nit grit details, like saying the principles, but not actually living them out. So I had a lot of questions in terms of my relationship to Jainism and what does it mean to be a Jain? And even if you're born into it or not, it doesn't, to me, it feels like a way of life. Just, I don't even call it a religion in my head. I know it is considered that, but for me, it's how I'm living my life, because it's not like, okay, if I do XYZ things, lightning is going to strike me down and I'm not this or that anymore. So it's very interesting. I love how the responsibility is on the self and the individual. And so I learned more about it when I was doing my MA, and I wanted to study, there's a little bit of Jainism that's covered, but I was interested to know from a text standpoint, when these things were written. And I realized that, the first text, at least that's found, that's been recovered, that still exists. I'm sure there are copies and other texts that were burned or destroyed in the past. was written 300 years after Mahavira, so the last Tirthankar. So how much can be changed in language by the time it reaches that text? You know, how much can change because of patriarchy, because of different political issues, different political, you know, views, influence
Right.
of practices, right? So I think for me, how I'm living my daily life, how much it also intertwines with yoga, and you know, am I really practicing the principles in the time and the space that I'm in? So I think for me, it's always been quite serious, actually, since I was a child. But I think my relationship with what Jainism means to me, it doesn't need to be a label, but it is very strong and very personal.
A follow-up question to that. Would you say that Jainism, I guess, would you say that Jainism played a major role in you choosing to pursue yoga and like your career, etc.?
I didn't choose yoga. I think yoga chose me, to be quite.
That's fair. That's
Yeah,
fair.
because I just kind of like my dad, my only relationship with yoga was when I would see my dad doing different yogic poses and Shirshasana, you know, like headstand. And
Mhm.
he was like, I want to do that, you know, and that was my first introduction to asana, really. But it wasn't like, and it's still not my only focus or main focus, but I think it was a very personal practice. And I had a really good friend who was teaching a certification. I was like, you really need to, it's me teaching it. And I respect him as a teacher. And he was like, you need to join. So I only took it to learn, not to teach. And because unfortunately the yogic space in America and the West, there's such few Indian voices, you know, and there's such few Indian teachers, and it's been so appropriate, which I'm sure we'll get into later on, that my voice actually meant something and people, you know, felt connected to it. So it kind of led to me, and so Jainism has always been there, but I think how I teach the yoga is more from a Jain inspired lens, and giving that voice, I think, is what makes it different.
Gotcha. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
So moving on to our next question. This speaks to your involvement at Arihanta Academy, so for the both of you. So how did you get involved with Arihanta Academy initially? And how has that changed your perspective on Jainism? Or I guess also a follow-up if you want to answer this part too. How has that changed, or how, or I guess what effect has that had on your career as well?
Yeah, like I just mentioned, I used to go to like a Siddhachalam a lot, which like before Siddhachalam, Guruji was living in Staten Island. Guruji is a Social Muniji, Acharya Social Muniji. So when the Siddhachalam came up, he always remember me. Every couple of months, Shanti, come on down here. So me, Kusum, and our family, we went there. And we started teaching yoga, reflexology, healing techniques. Guruji taught aura and healing. We did yoga. Because of the yoga background, when I was like learned from Nassau boarding, and later on in Pune University, I met the people who are doing yoga, and they kind of mentioned to me each one postures I was doing as a name. I didn't even know the name of the whole posture. And later on, I found there are literally thousands and thousands postures. If you do one, that's become one posture. If you do this is posture. If you put arm this way, and there are every variation, every other thing what we do become a movement. So there I met Parvin Jain in Siddhachalam, and he was very devoted to Guruji. He almost recorded everything he heard, and it's a beautiful book. He wrote that in Guruji's memory, Guruji's teaching. So after I made that, one day there's somehow like he called me and said, we're going to start Arihant Academy. Would you be kind enough to teach yoga? Yoga for I have no problem. I can just get up at night and start doing yoga for 3-4 hours. So I said, I'll be happy. And I could probably focus on Jain aspect of yoga, because Patanjali is 5 yamas and our Panchama are the same. There's a Pratyahara, there's a Pratisallikana in Jainism. There's a Samayik Pratikraman, we do that, the same thing. See, there's a lot of similarities. And working with the then Siddhachalam and Guruji, and when they asked me, I thought, I have no idea about like computer. Everybody else got involved, and we did 10 lessons, a pre-recorded lesson, and then I did like a 10 weeks of like Arihant Academy with Arihant Academy.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Mayuri, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Uncle. Yeah, no, mine's really short. I think Chris Miller, who's one of the teachers and people who helped create, I know Chris from the yoga studies program that I was at LMU, and Chris kind of called me up and he said, hey, we're trying to do this first online Jain Academy. And I liked because, you know, there's a lot of efforts that go into trying to make something like this happen. And I just felt like the people involved and what they were trying to do, the vision for it was great. And, you know, I'm currently not active on there, but when I do teach in between, I think what's really cool is that they're just trying to reach out to any and all ages wherever they are in the world. And kind of for me to bring asana also from a I do have a more modern postural influence from being raised in the West. So I think bringing my dance background a little bit and bringing a different ways that I approach it, and maybe a different younger perspective is, yeah. So just kind of doing what I do, and that was it for me.
Very cool. Thank you for both those questions or answers. Sorry. So the next two questions, they're going to be focused on each of you. So I have a separate question for both of you. So Mayuri, this will be for you first. So you hold many different roles as an activist, a yoga instructor, poet, actor, and many more. So we kind of already touched on this before as well, but I'm going to ask a little bit more specifically. So all these different roles that you hold, do you see this affecting how you incorporate religion, Jainism into your life? And if so, how, I guess more specifically?
Yeah, 100%. As an actor, I think the right off the bat example I can give is with commercial acting, for example. So when I do commercials, because of, it's not just like, okay, this is my religion, and then again, I don't apply it in my life, right? So even in my work, from the beginning, I knew I would tell the agents and managers and whoever I was with that, look, I'm not going to do any fast food commercials. I'm not going to do oil company commercials. I'm not going to do any alcohol commercials. I'm not going to do leather commercials, which is like 70 to 80% of the market, you know? So I know I'm losing out on money and opportunities. And even on set, they'll be like, hey, don't worry, we're going to give you like a veggie patty. Like you're not even going to be eating. But at the end of the day, I'm selling that product, right? So I automatically from the get-go am like, I will not do these things. Or if an audition comes my way, I'll research the company, you know, what are their labor laws like, you know, what are all of their products? What are they doing? So yes, I kind of have to do a lot of my own research. Most of the time, the managers and agents I've worked with have been pretty good about like not sending anything my way. But if anything does slip through, it's my responsibility to look at the company if I don't know it and kind of be in touch with what's going on. Because so many times when we're growing up, we kind of just take, also there weren't that as many vegetarian and vegan options aside from food until now, but medicines that we take, products that we, lotions that we put on. I mean, if we read the ingredients on the smallest things, it's crazy. So you kind of, even today, have to do research on anything. And so I did the same with my field of work. Now, would mistakes happen? Absolutely, I'm sure, you know, where things I didn't know about, there's always something, but I think I try my best to, as an actor, and what kind of writing am I involved in? You know, what's the story that's being told? How authentic is it? You know, so I think just kind of going through that process with anything that I do, that the research, the filtering, is this a voice that I want to spread and talk about? That's kind of how it's like almost second nature at this point. You know, it's not something I have to think about. It's kind of like my routine. So I think it's just really important for anyone to educate themselves, but I think it's just a little more ingrained in me as a habit because of the way I was raised. So I think I've kind of always had that inside of me. Like even when I would order food when I was younger, totally sidetracking here, but and I know I'm doing it. But like when I'd order food, for example, I would remember that like I learned to say in America allergy. You know, I'd be like, there's a meat allergy, seafood allergy, egg allergy, because if you say religion, or if you say like this, you have to speak the language of the country, and this country understands not being sued. So if they have a threat of being sued, they're like, oh my God, they have an allergy button. It's taken very seriously. I mean, of course, I try to now support. It's very easy to go to vegan places now, but it's funny how you sometimes have to speak that language. So not just by like, okay, are we doing like tapasya and are we doing our individual practice, but like if you're in business, if you're in the medical field, whatever field you're in, like, Are you supporting medicines, or what are you, putting your money out for? Like, what are you producing? Like, there's just so many questions. And I think whatever field you're in, I think it's almost like a responsibility if that's how you feel you want to stem from, if that makes sense. I hope that addresses what we were talking about.
No, it does. And I think it's really inspiring that you're able to like stand by that and kind of do your own research to kind of follow your own principles, or to follow principles of Jainism, even though it may cause, like cause, I guess, I don't know what the word is I want to use, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. I'll also say that, like, look, there will be some people who will be like, oh, well, we're not going to work with you. You're losing out on so much money, or how are you, like, luckily that's your answer to know that, like, you don't want to work with those people. You know what I mean? If they're not going to be in support of your vision and who you are, that's your clear answer. Luckily, I didn't come across that. I think sometimes if you're also grounded in what you stand for, people don't mess with that. I think they're very clear, like, okay, this person's not budging. Either we go with that or we don't. But I haven't encountered that with quite a few managers and agents that I've seen so far. Nobody's been like, are you serious? Like, you're gonna, like, luckily that's not been the case for me.
Okay. Well, that's really good to hear. Thank you for that. Next question is for Shanti uncle. So you hold a degree in the sciences, but you chose to focus your life on practicing and teaching yoga. So how did you make that decision for yourself, and how has that affected your perspective and your connection to Jainism?
I was in Ferguson College, and I had like a strong interest in physics, chemistry, math, and other aspect. I wanted to go to the arts and study Prakrit and Sanskrit, but my professors and friends said, "You're crazy. You're like 80%. You're a national scholar. You should just go in science or engineering." I really didn't want to go to major engineering, but geology was like very, very close, because we think Higindia, Beindia, Teindia, Chaurindia, Panchandia, that like earth is very important. You should not disturb it. And so I decided to study in detail geology, mining engineering. And I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah. The question was, you have a degree in the sciences, but you chose to focus on practicing and teaching yoga. So how did you come to that decision, which you kind of already addressed?
Right.
And how has that affected your connection to Jainism, your perspective on Jainism?
Yeah, with the science, then I like a lot of there's a more destruction involved with the mining. There's a more destruction involved in finding, digging, and so on. So even if I become mining engineer, I decided in my mind I just came here because of scholarship. I got it in a good university and a good program. After that, I decided not to stay in geology. That's the first thing. It was a major kind of decision. How do I do that? You're almost so close to having PhD in geology. I already told them I just finished master's. I will not do PhD. Then my whole aim is to basically start following as much as I can Jain principle in everyday life. Luckily, I was teaching yoga at the University of Buffalo, and a lot of people got impressed by the flexibility or the movement we did. And I had almost 180, 190 students in the class. And half of them, they say, how come you're so flexible and you're agile, and how come we are not? I said, something to do with my diet. I don't eat eggs, I don't eat fish, meat. But then how do you get your protein? All kinds of things. Really showing that you don't need really like a meat or other things, just like lentils and rice and other things help you. And so that gave me a little chance to do my own experimentation. When I came to Buffalo, there was nobody in Jainism, nothing was. Then I just went to the phone directory. Any name sounding like Bhandari, write it down. Jain, any Jain, Mehta. And I called them. I said, we're going to do this Mahavir Jayanti here. They said, Mahavir Jayanti at the University of Buffalo? I said, yeah. And how many Jains are? I said, there are around 12 or 14. There are 15 to 18 families came. There was one Jain has 3 families. They came. And then we started like doing a Jain seminary and teaching, because there is yoga and Jainism, you cannot separate. They are together almost word by word. Even actually, Vitrag word is used in a Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Vitrag. and other Nirgranth and other things too. So that gave me like by not doing geology, I got more into the yoga. Then I learned non-drug therapies. Original idea, I was going to either doctor or engineer, but I quit, and we started focusing totally on. And then we have our own yoga center. Guruji came, and the miracle happened. I could not even go back to Buffalo because I left a university. But somehow there's some interesting happened, and we got to meet with him, and we invited him to Niagara area because I couldn't go because of we had a motel in Niagara Falls. I couldn't go to all the time to Siddhachalam. So Guruji and all the other teachers, they came up here, and so that was easy. And my own backyard, and we get the chance to like ask a good question to the top-notch like Jain scholars. So basically, by changing the decision, not staying in where I did was the right thing, then children didn't have to go from one place to other. Otherwise, in geology, I would have going everywhere, Montana, Yukon, Arizona, wherever.
Thank you for sharing. So I'm gonna move on to our next question. This is for Mayuri. So we're gonna talk a little bit about Bindi. So you put out a poetry film called Bindi. It shows the history behind the Bindi and how it has been appropriated. Yoga and mindfulness are concepts that come from the East, and they have also been appropriated in similar ways. So the question is, how do you define that line between appropriation and appreciation when you teach yoga, and how it conveys its meaning to our students so that they do not appropriate practices?
That's really, I like how you phrase that for even us to not appropriate, because people often think that appropriation just happens by white people, and that's not the case. Usually it is the majority, many times culturally, but person of color can easily appropriate other people of color. The definitions are online, but I think the best three that I found that makes sense in the best way is that when cultural appropriation generally happens when you have a majority culture that takes a practice or a regalia or a custom or a ritual from a minority culture, usually at the expense of their suffering, exploitation, and they remove it from its essence of what it is, and it becomes accepted only by the majority pop culture when majority pop culture does it. But when minority culture is doing their own custom or ritual, it's seen as a threat, or it's mocked, or it's weird, it's not accepted. And the majority culture usually profits off of the minority culture at the same time. And so that is generally the definition, or how you explain cultural appropriation. And like I said, it's usually there's a exploitation, commodification, and money profit that's happening at the same time. And then also you can see it, for example, when Native American headdresses are worn at Coachella, or Black people can't wear their hair a certain way for work, but then they'll wear it in fashion shows out of context and it's accepted there. So you can literally put anything in place of the Bindi poem in the way that I've said it, as you said, whether it be yoga, any kind of thing, and it still applies. And so I think the best way for us to, usually we can see it, people of color generally see it very well, in terms of how when you see it happening, but people don't understand, like, oh, they're just sharing our culture. Like it's sharing, it's appreciating, it's not appropriating. And I think the line is drawn when people of that culture, again, are mocked or seen as a threat, or can't still feel uncomfortable doing their thing. And the other culture, the big culture, is profiting off of it. So examples that I can give, like in the Bindi, for example, most people of our background don't even know, unless you're in the Jersey or the New York area, that there were the dock killings, a hate crime that happened from 85 to 93, roughly, about maybe total of 50 killings to 200 attacks. They were attacked by young Italian Americans. They attacked Indian people in the area based on, wearing the Bindi or their regalia, where they were wearing Indian outfits, hate crime. But my mom, for example, she was told by Indian people in the area when she first came that, don't wear it because you could be potentially attacked. So to come to the land of the free, supposedly, and then be like, remove yourself of your identity out of safety, and then you see it being worn by Madonna or Gwen Stefani or, you know, someone else in a bikini at Coachella having no connection. It's pretty obvious in those circumstances where it's like, yeah, this is appropriation. I think what happens is some people are like, well, I asked my one Indian friend, they said it was cool. Well, usually that one Indian person doesn't speak for a whole billion population and a whole culture. And so many other people didn't even know about that event going on. So for us, to answer your second part where you're saying, how can we not fall in the same pattern? It's really educating ourselves before coming to like taking on any other ritual or habit that we're not familiar with. I even ask ourselves, like, why do we wear it? You know, do we wear it out of tradition and habit? Do we only get the pass because it was passed down in our culture? I asked my mom, I asked my grandma, I was like, what does it mean to you? If it means something to you, this applies to anything in life. If it means something to you, just know why you're choosing to do anything. You know, ask the questions. Don't just accept because that's what I was told. Well, that's why anybody does anything. What does it really mean to you? And so if you go down that path, because there's a lot of people who are interested in different things, and there is a different way of really appreciating. If you really appreciate doesn't mean taking it out of context. Appreciate means educating yourself, going to the people that are celebrating it, learning the history of the culture. Usually there's some kind of trauma around it. Or if you participate in it, they actively invite you. So if you go to Native American ceremonies, they're going to actively invite you in that space when they feel it's appropriate or ready to participate in whatever, you know? And I think it's really, really important that whatever land you're on, you need to know that history. So you need to, I'm in Los Angeles. I want to know the people of Tongva land. We need to know the indigenous history. We need to know the history of where we're at because that's where we are. And so I think that when it comes to us appropriating, I think it's ahimsa is super big, like nonviolence to the extent of how am I taking this on? Am I learning enough about this ritual or this thing before I just put it on and think it's cute or I get the pass because I'm a person of color? So I think that helps with the second part that you asked.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Follow-up question to that. Do you think there are Jain practices specifically that are being appropriated by popular culture or another culture? And if so, how can we as young Jain youths, or even just anyone who's Jain in general, how can we prevent that from happening?
That's a really cool question. One, I don't think enough people know about Jainism. However, I do think like outside, you know, of our subcontinent region, some people do know in academic spaces. But I think what I do see a lot of is yoga being appropriated, like to the nth degree. I could talk about that. That's a whole other session on its own. But what I would say is that I feel like sometimes Jain stuff is maybe not appropriated, but made so dogmatic it feels like appropriation by our own people sometimes in different ways. But I don't know if I see Jainism itself being appropriated, but I think the idea of ahimsa or these principles that we stem from, I see them appropriated in modern day bougie veganism. And what I mean by that is that like there's a difference between cultural veganism and I call it, that's how I divide it in my head, bougie veganism and cultural veganism, because bougie veganism is like just diet. It's just a fad. It's cute, you know, it's fashion. It's not actually living, again, that way of life. Like people are just looking for that quick fix, that diet. It's not really about other species, it's about them. It's like where you have restaurants that are super expensive. You know, a chicken salad without the chicken is $25 when the chicken salad is $13. Like it's ridiculous. Like it should not be so expensive, right? Or so exploited. So that's where I see that. I think like Ayurvedic ways, yogic ways, Indian culture, Hinduism, I think this idea of mindfulness, selling mindfulness and selling ahimsa, that's what's being appropriated as a whole, not necessarily just Jain customs. Because like I said, I don't think Jainism's popularity is big enough, but I'm pretty sure in modern day, the way that mindfulness is being sold and the way that everything is capitalized and exploited, it's on its way. But personally, I don't know if I've seen exactly Jain rituals be exploited, but I do feel like a lot of, not a lot, but I feel like some Jains don't necessarily practice what it means. So it feels like it's not being used to its fullest extent, the way it's meant to be. But I would say a lot of Indian culture is probably one of the most appropriated things I've ever seen. So I don't know if that addresses everything that you said, because that could be, again, an entire topic.
I'd like to
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. yoga has become almost corrupt term here nowadays. It's a yoga, and people don't even say yoga, but it's yoga. It doesn't matter. But there's a hot yoga, goat yoga, beer yoga, wine yoga. And
Yeah.
the definition Patanjali is yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Whatever, like get the activities of mind under control through pratyahara and pranayam, that was completely gone. I've seen a lot of people, they teach Ashtanga yoga, 8-fold of yoga. And I ask them, are you vegetarian? Say, no. Then how can you say yama, niyam, asan, pranayam, pratyahara, dharana, dhyan, samadhi? The aim of yoga, according to our Uma Sotiji, Mokkhena Joyana yoga, that which you takes you to the moksha, liberates you from mundane existence. That is yoga. But now the yoga has become pumping iron, making our arms strong, running fast, whatever.
Yeah.
Everything what yoga is not. And in the name of yoga, they are building big, like empires. And where is the aparigraha then? Is gone. I mean, there's a huge, one particular person will teach like 1 crore just for one camp of yoga. How that could be called yoga?
Can I add on to that? Because it's
sometimes even in our temple ritual, sometimes we use milk for pouring on an idol. The people don't have milk or food for food, and then we're wasting it. 1 drop, 2 drop is different, but when you're using thousands of like buckets of milk poured on something, there, where is the parigraha? Then it become parigraha. You need to have more milk. We need to bring that. So in some way, we have to like remember that yoga is not only just for body and mind, but it's a spiritual progress, and constantly become vigilant, being mindful. What I talk, Mahavir said, just watch how you sit, how you stand, how you think, how you eat. We have almost lost all that. And so yoga will be basically, if you can liberate you from your own mundane, kama, krodh, mad, machar, lobh, all those like enemies, then we have become winner. Then we follow the Jain and Jain yoga then, or any yoga. Thank you.
Right. Mayuri, I know you said you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
Yeah.
it's basically adding on to what Uncle said, it's dumbed down to a fitness class. And I talk about this is something I talk about a lot too, is that it's become ego enhancing in the Western space than ego working. And it's actually become almost dangerous because even after a COVID in 2020, I was not surprised by these stats at all, but about 40% of QAnon supporters, QAnon, the people that infiltrated the White House and those extremist groups, about 40 to 50% of them are involved in some kind of white Christian yoga studio. Now that's may come as a surprise to some people, but that's not shocking to me at all, given what I've seen in the culture and how I see it being taught. Because you have a certification set up at studios. They can literally teach whatever they want. They're charging bank. They're only adhering to their customers. They're not looking at the welfare of the actual bigger community of their people. So the language that's being taught in the studios, teachers don't know any better. They're just learning whatever they learn, and it stops there. But it can literally be like their mic in the classroom to teach and talk about whatever. There's no policing. There's no sense of responsibility. And it makes it, that's why there's no brown people in the class for the most part, because we almost feel uncomfortable and we feel like the weird ones out. So it's not a pretty picture, and it's one of the biggest industries. I mean, Lululemon alone makes 46.7 billion a year. Just
Wow.
a clothing company that has nothing to do with yoga, so it's millions. It's so much money involved. It's insane.
No, that's crazy. Wow. Well, we're gonna wrap up this panel with one final question. Well, that's crazy. So yeah. So last question is, given everything we've talked about today, what direction do you think Jainism is going in? And how can the youth of today, as young Jains of America, how can we work to keep Jainism alive in our daily lives? And more broadly, how can we make sure Jainism isn't appropriated more broadly, or Indian culture isn't appropriated? And how can we work as young Jains to kind of keep Jainism alive and continue to apply it?
Just my one simple thing is like practice. If you say something, you put it in your own life. And Otherwise, theoretically, we know everything. Jainism says this puja should be done like that, samik should be done like that, but we don't do it. So even if you spend 10 minutes in meditation, in pranayama meditation, and feeling the soul, not the body. Body is like perishable. Body will die. The mind and soul mind may get fuzzy as time goes by, but the soul is the one. And how would the karma affect the soul? We have to be conscious of that. Try to minimize some of the things. I have nice organization in Canada that towards ahimsa. They don't say complete ahimsa. That's impossible to follow. Young Jain probably, they may have to like walk, use car, doing something. So some violence is necessary. We cannot totally go. But if you go towards ahimsa, eventually you want to be 80 or 90% follower of ahimsa, if not 100%. Same thing, satya. We go towards satya, go towards asteya. Try not to, we still identity, our own thing. I say this is shanti, but this is just the body. This may not, this will go away and into the atoms, will go back to the universe where it came from, and to realize that basic part. And soul progression, if everybody pay attention, that's good. Then, and Aryan academies help very well to put us on that mark to practicing what we preach or what we learn. And that's very valuable.
Thank you, Uncle. If Mayuri, you want to add anything to that?
I think he said it right on point. I think the application of what it looks like off the mat, right? So to speak in yogic terms, how are we applying these principles day-to-day life with the people that we engage the most, whether that be, because it's really easy to act nice when you're feeling nice or with strangers, but how are you applying that with people that you interact with the most, that you're most comfortable with, your family, your friends, your partners, because that's where it tests us the most. And I think that practicing in different ways, mind, body, thought, speech, not just our actions. Because the one beautiful thing about ahimsa specifically also is the negativity and judgment done towards the self, not just with others. So what kind of how are you creating harmful thoughts? Are you judging yourself? Are you having a voice in your head that speaks to yourself? How would you speak to a child? Is that the way you speak to yourself? Whose voice is that? So it's a lot of self-work. And I think really understanding the harm that we also do to ourselves, especially in this today's society and social media and all these other things that come into play. Another thing is, I think we have the privilege to speak up. Our parents' generation did not have that necessarily, just trying to make a space, just trying to survive, just trying to create a community. And a lot of people coming in now who study or get jobs very easily, or just us, we have a privilege of having the opportunity, they were just trying to grind and make it work, and we are in a place where we can speak up about these issues and, thrive even more. And I think we sometimes come from backgrounds that are hey, peace, or maybe general with East Asians, and Asians just, we do the grind, don't talk back, don't cause a ruckus, it's fine. But we need to, and it doesn't have to be in a hymsic way, right? We can do it, but I think speaking up in whichever form that, whether that be for me, through art, through poetry, through, whatever form of protest that looks like, I think having our voices heard, and maybe our parents too. And I think that's why Bindi means a lot to me, because it's my mother's voice. And they were never asked about themselves. I feel like the parents' generation, it's working for their family back home and working for their kids. They never got to think for themselves. And our grandparents' generation probably too, and many generations before that, especially our women. And so I really have to dig in and ask certain ways to get certain things out of my mother, answers wise. So I think it's really important to also touch with them, understand the traumas and the healing that can happen that we may not, because communication is maybe not something that happens a lot. But I think speaking up and giving voice to those who have not even thought about that voice. So
yeah. It's very beautifully put, both of you. Thank you very much. That ends our questions, our pre-formed questions. Now at this time, we will take questions, any questions that our audience members have, anything that might be in the chat. I'm not sure if you guys can unmute, but feel free to drop your questions in the chat and our panelists will be happy to answer. We'll give you all like a minute. And then, okay, I am going to take that as a sign that no one has any questions. You guys, that means you guys did an amazing job. Oh wait, I
have
know.
one.
Oh, yeah. I'll read it out loud. So this one's for Mayuri. I know you briefly mentioned your mother, but for both panelists, do you have any notable role models that align with your journey and that inspired you?
I'll let Uncle take this first, and then I can answer after if he wants to say anything.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Question was, what role models inspired you along your journey?
My father, actually, we didn't have like a big place in a village, constantly moving. He followed his diet, strict vegetarian diet, and he was so kind. I mean, he was a money lender and other businesses. When people didn't have money, he did not really charge them. He said, that's fine. And a lot of people in our village used to call him Babaji, wise one, no? And so if anybody has like a conflict, you listen to this person, that person, and he set everything well for everybody. So all the conflicts resolved. He started a society for like farmers. He bought the canal there. So he's my role model. My mother was kind and was just very simple. She didn't have much education, and I don't recall, I didn't even see my grandfather from both sides. So that's the only, like my dad, you do this, I did it, basically, and my role. And then later on, then Vasant Muniji was become my role model, and then Guruji become role model. It's like every time you need something to grow, some role model come. We have like Kirloskal Circus came, and I saw them, and they saw me doing yoga because I was doing yoga class there in that town. They said, why don't you join our circus? I said, no, I don't want to join circus. I mean, I was flexible, but not to go for circus. I need to study. And my dad said, wherever you go, doesn't matter, you go, we will not stop you. So that literally took him from our village to Lasargaon, to Pune, to Bombay, to Buffalo, and to Canada. Thank you.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing. Mayuri, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, my mom's passion for sure. In terms of role models with Jain stuff or in general, I mean, my dad, I love the way my dad questions everything, his curiosity. He doesn't take things point blank. And he really looks at things from also a scientific perspective, which I think that was also very inspiring for me. I mentioned the books. I think the Jain spirituality has just always been very, very deeply influential to me. Again, not in the dogmatic sense. I really wanted to study more of the deeper meaning beyond surface level. And I think anybody that's come along my way, I think any practice or any teacher, like where I saw the action of what they were doing, not anything that anyone said. It wasn't necessarily what they were saying that inspired me, it was what they were doing. And I think so anytime I saw and empowering women, I think, are just any empowering women from anywhere doing anything. So it's not one person per se, it's a lot of people and a lot of different actions that I see.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. Any other questions from any other audience members? If not, we can wrap this up.
I think there's one more question I see by Vidhi, but I don't know if you want to get to that.
Let me see. Oh, this was earlier. Sorry, Vidhi or Vitika?
No, it's right after. It's like right at
66. Oh, Vidhi. Okay, gotcha. Oh yeah. What are some examples of how you practice Jainism in your daily life?
I think I'll give that to Parikam.
Myself, how do you practice Jainism in my life? Jainism and yoga is a become part of my life, basically. So I start my day with the Naukar mantra, meditation, pranayam, and walking meditation. So that keeps focus and calmness. Then evening, also like if I finish the same thing, and I will not sleep unless I read something on Jainism, because there's so much information there. I was just going to mention why I chose this, because Jainism speaks about biology in a different term completely, and there's no modification necessary. When you say Igindya, Bindya, Tendya, Chodya, Panchendya, then human being and Narkin, and so on. Then in physics too, what Mahavir spoke and some Ragam spoke, now they are coming too. This Saptabhangi Nyaya, Naya, this could be, this could not be, this may be, those are 7 possibilities, paryayas. And so basically, I appreciate more now about Jainism and working with the Ayurveda Academy. You had to polish my all the information I had, but I just make sure to fact check. I'm not saying anything wrong and basically collect. So I start the day with the mantras and finish the day with mantra. We try to fast sometime, or Parishon time a lot. And we all get together, family members, children, grandchildren, everybody. We do Samik together once or twice a year. Oftentimes, they participate in our Mandir activity, just speak about Jainism. So children and grandchildren, they're really like working on. My days, that's what I get. And eventually, I'd like to wish God give me like strength so I can do Santara, even for a few days or a few hours. So my death is finished and improved.
Thank you, Uncle. Go ahead.
I'll just say that I need to practice it a lot more personally. But for me, I think it's self-reflection. So if there's something that happens in the day or happens in the moment out of emotions or rage or emotions come up, I think taking the time to reflect and then taking the action after accordingly, or just stopping to breathe, even just like before I have an immediate response. I think that's something that I really like. And of course, as in my profession or doing whatever I'm doing, what's my intention? Questioning, where is it coming from? Am I doing this out of like show for myself? Is it performative? Is it from a true place? So even the art is very much intertwined with the spirituality, which I think is really, really special. And yeah, I think it's in a lot of different ways, but I think the self-reflection is the biggest. And I just wanted to add on something from before that you guys were talking about, how Jainism can look like. I see Jainism today in a lot of the vegan movements that are happening around the world. Like, to me, it's like a direct, like, this is when I meet people with vegan activism, I'm like, this stuff is really old. Like, this goes way back. There's like an OG with this practice. So I think that if we can align with a lot of the vegan movements that are happening, there's even growth there of people understanding that this is not a new thing. This is something that has been practiced for a long time. So just segueing into that for a moment, but yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, both of you, for your wonderful responses. Last call for any questions. If not, I keep them coming, but I think that's it. I don't see anything else in the chat. Unless
I don't know if you guys covered this, but could you go over the YGA convention next year real quick?
So that's not something we're going to be talking about on this call, but if you drop your email in the chat, we can send you more information afterwards, if that's okay. All right, Rihi, you can wrap it up.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So thank you again to our panelists, Mayuri and Shanti Uncle. Before we leave you all for the night, we want to just reiterate for all of you to consider how you incorporate Jainism into your lives today and how you plan to keep it alive in your life following in the future. But if anything we have presented goes against the teachings of Bhagwan Mahavir, we sincerely ask for your forgiveness. Mittam Ridokram, and thank you all for coming tonight. We really appreciate you all spending your Sunday night with all of us. And of course, a big thank you to our panelists as well.